The gavel struck the sounding block with absolute and decisive finality at precisely 3 minutes past 10 o'clock in the morning, signaling the commencement of what would become a historic confrontation. Madame, Chairwoman, I must, formally and vociferously, object to the presence of this particular witness. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar's voice sliced through the atmosphere of the House Foreign Affairs Committee hearing room with the sharpness of a honed blade. She did not merely stand up from her position. Rather, she erupted from her seat with an explosive energy, her hand thrusting forward aggressively, pointing a finger directly at the woman who was sitting with utter calmness at the witness table across the room. Tulsi Gabbard is a documented Islamophobic warmonger who possesses absolutely no credibility whatsoever regarding matters of human rights or the ethical conduct required of congressional members. She has met with the brutal dictator Assad. In Syria, she actively disseminates propaganda on behalf of authoritarian regimes, and she is a traitor to the progressive values we hold dear. The room instantly descended into a heavy silence as cameras swiveled rapidly to capture the moment, and reporters leaned forward. In anticipation, Omar's finger remained extended, trembling ever so slightly. With the intensity of her righteous fury, I move that she be immediately barred from providing testimony at this witness table. Lieutenant Colonel Tulsi Gabbard, a combat veteran and former Congresswoman who was currently serving as the Director of National Intelligence, did not flinch or show any sign of intimidation. Her hands remained folded peacefully on the table. Her expression remained completely neutral and calm, reflecting the stoic face of someone who had endured mortar fire in Iraq and learned through hard experience that the most dangerous moment is always the split second, right before you take action. She reached down slowly and deliberately and lifted a substantial manila folder onto the table. The movement was surgical and precise. Congresswoman Omar Gabbard, said her voice, carrying the measured and unshakable authority of a seasoned military officer. Thank you for publicly questioning my credibility. The room held its collective breath in the pause that followed. Since you have brought up the subjects of ethics and credibility, I believe it is appropriate that we should engage in a full and comprehensive discussion regarding those topics. Another pause ensued as her hand opened the folder, revealing its contents. Let us begin with your marriages, all 3 of them, and then we shall discuss the $250,000 fine. You incurred the allegations regarding immigration fraud, the campaign, finance violations that total in the millions, and yes, we will absolutely discuss your anti-Semitic statements that resulted in a bipartisan House resolution condemning your rhetoric. She looked up and her eyes locked onto Omar with intense focus. I served in Iraq and I earned the Combat Medical Badge for treating wounded soldiers. While under direct enemy fire, I have deployed twice to active war zones. The folder opened wider, revealing more documents. What exactly have you done, Congresswoman? Explosion that followed this confrontation would generate 350 million views. Within the span of 72 hours, it would crack the protective shield that surrounded the squad. It would expose systematic fraud occurring at the highest levels of Congress, and it would prove something that many Americans desperately wanted to believe, which is that evidence still matters more than identity politics, that honor still holds meaning, and that a combat veteran who has faced real enemies is not afraid of political ones. This is the story of that destruction. If you appreciate the truth, the documented evidence-based and receipt-backed truth, then you should destroy that like button, because what you are about to hear is every single fact, every single document, and every single contradiction that the mainstream media chose to ignore. Let us begin the narrative. The House Foreign Affairs Committee hearing had been scheduled for months, with the topic being Ethics in Foreign Policy and Congressional Conduct. It was supposed to be the routine testimony featuring former diplomats, foreign policy experts, and perhaps a retired general. But then the committee chairman made a decision that would fundamentally change everything he invited. Tulsi Gabbard, the invitation made perfect sense, because Gabbard had served 4 terms representing Hawaii's 2nd District. She had been a member of this exact committee she had deployed to Iraq and Kuwait. She had served as vice chair of the Democratic National Committee before resigning on principle to endorse Bernie Sanders. She had run for president, and now, in the year 2025, she served as Director of National Intelligence in the Trump administration. Her credentials were absolutely impeccable as a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve, holding a combat medical badge, having deployed to Iraq in 2004 with a field medical unit and deployed to Kuwait in 2008 as a military police platoon leader, being the first woman to graduate with distinguished honors from the Alabama Military Academy Officer Candidate School, and the first female combat veteran ever elected to Congress, if anyone was qualified to speak to ethics in foreign policy. It was undoubtedly her, but to Ilhan Omar, Tulsi Gabbard represented something else entirely. She represented a threat. Omar had risen meteorically, having been elected in 2018 as part of the Squad 4 Progressive women of color who had stormed into Congress, promising to shake up the system. She had become the face of a new kind of politics, one that wielded identity as both a shield and a sword, using her status as Muslim, black immigrant, and refugee as a defense against any criticism of Omar being immediately branded as bigotry. It was a perfect defense, impenetrable, except against someone who could not be accused of Islamophobia or racism or misogyny, because she herself was a woman of color, a Hindu woman of color, who had served in combat and who had earned medals. Under fire, Gabbard was the kryptonite that Omar never expected to face. The hearing room filled quickly that morning with C-SPAN cameras, major network reporters, and digital media outlets, as everyone sensed that something significant might happen. Gabbard and Omar had clashed before, with sharp exchanges on Twitter, dueling op-eds and proxy battles through supporters. But they had never met, face-to-face, and never under oath. Gabbard entered at 9:47 in the morning, wearing a navy blue suit and an American flag pin on her lapel, her bearing unmistakably military. Despite the civilian clothes, she moved with economy and no wasted motion, sitting down at the witness table and arranging her materials with practiced efficiency, placing a bottle of water, a legal pad, a pen, and a manila folder, perhaps 2 inches thick, on the surface. Chairman Gregory Meeks gavelled the session to order at 10 o'clock sharp with standard opening, remarks, and introduction of witnesses, stating Gabbard would testify first, followed by 2 former ambassadors and a State Department ethics official. Lieutenant Colonel Gabbard Meeks said, "You may begin your opening statement." Gabbard adjusted the microphone slightly. She did not read. From notes, Mr. Chairman, ranking member, and committee members, thank you for the opportunity to testify. Today I come before you not as a partisan, but as someone who has dedicated her adult life to serving this country. I enlisted in the Hawaii Army National Guard 1 week after September 11th, 2001. When I was 20 years old, her voice was steady and conversational, the kind of tone you would use explaining something to a friend. In 2004, I deployed to Iraq with a medical unit, where I treated wounded soldiers, both American and Iraqi, under enemy fire. I saw what happens when foreign policy fails, when ethics are compromised, and when decisions made in Washington result in blood spilled in Baghdad. She paused just for a moment. I have spent my career trying to ensure we make better decisions, that we act with integrity, that we point of order. The interruption came like a gunshot. Ilhan Omar was on her feet, with her hand raised and her face set in an expression of moral outrage that had become her signature. Madame Chairwoman. She had turned to address the committee vice chair. I object to this witness because Tulsi Gabbard is an Islamophobic warmonger who has no credibility on human rights or congressional ethics. The room erupted with gasps and murmurs as a reporter dropped a pen. Omar's voice rose. She met with the dictator Bashar al-Assad in Syria. She spreads propaganda for authoritarian regimes. She has consistently sided with strong men over human rights. And she is a traitor to progressive values and to the Democratic Party she abandoned. She turned, pointing directly at Gabbard. I move that she be barred from testifying before this committee. Chairman Meeks hammered his gavel. Congresswoman Omar, you are out of order. The witness was properly invited. And Mr. Chairman, this woman has no credibility. Omar's voice carried that peculiar quality of someone who believes absolutely in their own righteousness. How can we discuss ethics when our SSN witness is fundamentally unethical when she is Congresswoman? Meek's voice hardened. You will be recognized in proper order. Sit down. Omar sat, but slowly, her expression radiating defiance. She had made her point. She had put it on record that Gabbard was Islamophobic, unethical, and compromised, and she had done it before Gabbard could say a word in her own defense. It was a power move textbook. Squad. Politics to attack. First attack hard and make them defend themselves at the witness table. Tulsi Gabbard, he had not moved. She had watched Omar's performance with the flat, evaluating gaze of someone assessing a threat, not emotionally but tactically. When the room quieted, and when Meeks gestured for her to continue, Gabbard did something unexpected. She smiled. Not a warm smile, but a combat smile. Congresswoman Omar, she said, her voice still calm and still measured. Thank you for questioning my credibility and my ethics. I appreciate it. Truly, she reached down and placed her hand on the manila folder because it gives me the opportunity to discuss yours. The smile did not waver. You called me Islamophobic. You called me a warmonger. You called me unethical. And you said, I have no credibility. Gabbard opened the folder, revealing papers, documents, and printouts. So let me ask you, Congresswoman, should we discuss your tests and 3 marriages, your $250,000 fine from the Minnesota Campaign Finance Board, which was the largest in state history, the allegations of immigration fraud, the $2.8 million in campaign funds paid to your husbands? Firm, she pulled out a document and held it up. Should we discuss the phrase, "It is all about the Benjamins"? Should we discuss your statement that Somali people should prioritize Somalia over America? Should we discuss the bipartisan House resolution condemning your anti-Semitic rhetoric? The room had gone from silent to a vacuum where no one breathed. Gabbard leaned forward slightly. You questioned my credibility. Congresswoman, I deployed to Iraq and I earned the Combat Medical Badge, treating wounded soldiers under enemy fire. I have served this country for over 2 decades, in uniform. Beat what have you done? And that is when the massacre began. Tulsi Gabbard did not wait for permission. She had been granted 5 minutes for an opening statement, but she took 47 minutes. Chairman Meeks let her, perhaps sensing that stopping her would cause more problems than allowing her to continue, or perhaps because what she was presenting was so thoroughly documented that shutting her down would look like a cover-up. Let us start with the marriages, Gabbard said, pulling out a timeline because this is where the fraud allegedly begins. She held up a document in the year 2000. And 2. Ilhan Omar enters into a religious marriage with Ahmed Abdisalan Hirsi, and they have 3 children together. This marriage is never legally formalized, which is unusual but not illegal. Another document in 2009, Omar legally marries Ahmed Nur Said Elmi in Minnesota, and they obtain a marriage license and they file as married. Gabbard looked up. Now here is where it gets interesting during her marriage to Elmi. Her legal husband Omar continues living with Hirsi, her first husband, the father of her children, and she files joint tax returns with Hirsi while legally married to Elmi. She let that sink in. That is tax fraud. Congresswoman, you cannot file joint tax returns with someone who is not your spouse. It is a federal crime, Chairman. Meeks started to interrupt, but Gabbard kept going in 2011. Omar has her 3rd child with Hirsi, while legally married to Elmi, in 2012. She purchases a home with Hirsi, while legally married to Elmi. They live together as a family, while she is legally married to someone else. This is harassment, Omar shouted. These lies have been thoroughly debunked. Gabbard did not raise her voice. Debunked by whom? Congresswoman, please tell me who debunked them. Silence, because investigative journalists from multiple outlets, conservative and liberal, looked into this, and the evidence shows that you married Ahmed Elmi. The evidence shows that you were simultaneously living with filing taxes with and having children with Ahmed Hirsi. Those are facts. She pulled out more papers. Now, here is the question everyone asked. Who is Ahmed Elmi? Because the timing is suspicious. He appears to be significantly younger than you. He was seeking student status, and he needed immigration benefits. Gabbard's voice took on a sharper edge, and multiple witnesses from the Somali community in Minneapolis have stated that Elmi is your biological brother. The room exploded. Omar shot to her feet. This is a disgusting smear. Islamophobic. Conspiracy theories. Gabbard remained seated calm. Then prove it, Congresswoman. Take a DNA test. Release your marriage records. Explain the timeline. Explain why you filed joint taxes with one man while married to another. Explain the social media posts before you deleted them, showing Elmi referring to your apartment as home. Explain the school records listing the same address for both of you. She spread her hands. You have had years to clear this up, but you have never provided evidence refuting it. Instead, you attack anyone who asks questions. You call them racist conspiracy theorists. Gabbard leaned back. I served in Iraq with Muslim soldiers. Congresswoman, I fought alongside them. I trusted them with my life, and they trusted me with theirs. So do not tell me I am Islamophobic for asking why you will not answer basic questions about documented facts. She picked up another document. In 2017, you finally divorce Elmi. In 2018, you legally marry Hirsi the man you have been living with all along, the father of your 3 children. You formalize what was always the reality. But here is the problem. Those tax returns. The Minnesota Campaign Finance and Public Disclosure Board investigated, and they found violations. You had improperly filed joint returns. You had used campaign funds for personal expenses, including to pay a lawyer to handle your marriage issues. Gabbard held up an official document. The board fined you $500 initially, which you NP fought. Then the state investigation deepened, and in 2019, you agreed to pay back $3,469 in campaign funds you had used improperly. She paused. But that was not the end. In 2020, the board fined you an additional $250,000, the largest campaign finance fine in Minnesota history. The investigation found you had violated Minnesota campaign finance law by using campaign funds for personal travel, personal legal fees, and personal expenses related to your marriages. Omar tried to interject. That fine was politically motivated. Was it? Gabbard's eyebrows rose. Because you paid it, Congresswoman? And notably, you paid it with more campaign money. Think about that. You were fined for misusing campaign funds, so you used campaign funds to pay the fine. A ripple of dark laughter went through the press gallery. Now, let us address the brother allegation directly, Gabbard continued, because you have called it debunked, but you have never actually debunked it. Multiple journalists, including liberal journalists who wanted to prove it false, found troubling evidence. She counted on her fingers one school records listing you and Elmi at the same address in Minnesota as teenagers before your marriage, 2 social media posts suggesting a sibling relationship, 3 statements from community members, 4 immigration patterns consistent with marriage fraud, Elmi obtaining citizenship benefits, then the marriage ending once those benefits were secured, 5 your complete refusal to provide any evidence refuting the allegation. No DNA test, no family photos, nothing. Gabbard's voice softened, became almost conversational. Now, I am not saying it is definitively proven. I am saying the evidence is substantial enough that it deserves investigation, and I am saying that your response attacking questioners as bigots rather than providing evidence is exactly what guilty people do. She closed that section of the bases. The folder you committed, tax fraud that is documented by the state. Of Minnesota, you violated campaign finance law, also documented, and there are credible allegations of immigration fraud that you have never properly addressed. She looked directly at Omar. You called me unethical? You questioned my credibility? But I have never defrauded the IRS? I have never violated campaign finance law? I have never married someone under suspicious circumstances and refused to answer basic questions about it? The silence? I was crushing. I served in combat. Congresswoman, I followed military law, federal law, and the Uniform Code of Military Justice. I maintained integrity under circumstances where people were trying to kill me. Can you say the same if Tulsi Gabbard had stopped there? It would have been devastating enough, but she was just getting started. She turned a page in her folder. Let us move to the campaign finance violations because the $250,000 fine, that is just the tip of the Manas iceberg. She pulled out a financial document, held it up for the cameras. In 2020, the Daily Caller and other outlets began investigating unusual payments from your campaign, specifically payments to your husband's firm, Tim Mynette's E Street Group. Her finger traced down a column of numbers in 2018. Before you married Mynette, your campaign paid his firm about $60,000. Standard political consulting rates, nothing unusual. She looked up. Then, something changed. In April 2019, Tim Mynette's wife filed for divorce. In her filing, she explicitly stated that Mynette had told her he was leaving her. For you, Congresswoman Omar, she cited your affair in the divorce papers. That is personal and irrelevant. Omar shouted, "Is it?" Gabbard's voice remained level, because here is what happened to those campaign payments in 2019, the year the affair became public. Payments to Mynette's firm increased to $525,000. That is an 875% increase in 1 year. She let the number hang in the air in 2020. The payments continued. $1.1 million in 2021, $600,000 by 2024. Your campaign had paid Tim Mynette's firm, your boyfriend's firm, then your husband's firm, a total of $2.8 million. Gabbard spread out printouts, FEC filings, campaign finance reports. Now let us put this in context. Your district, Minnesota's 5th, is one of the Safest Democratic districts in the country. In 2020, you won with 64% of the vote. In 2022, and 74%. These are not competitive races, requiring massive campaign expenditures. She pulled out comparison data. The average House campaign spends between $50,000 and $100,000 on consulting. You have spent $2.8 million with one firm, the firm owned by the man you married. Her voice took on an edge. This is not consulting. This is enrichment. You are funneling campaign donations, money given by working people who believe in your message, into your husband's bank account. It is legal money laundering. We provided valid services. Omar protested. Did you? Gabbard tilted her head, because the FEC filings are remarkably vague. Consulting fees, strategy services, digital outreach. Nothing specific, nothing measurable, nothing showing what work was actually performed. She picked up another document, and it gets worse. Let us talk about the shell company scheme. From your early campaigns in 2018, you received support from Justice Democrats, a PAC founded by your ally, Saikat Chakrabarti, who later became Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Chief of Staff, Gabbard's military training showed in how she broke down complex information into clear, devastating points. Here is how the scheme worked. Justice Democrats' PAC would receive donations, but instead of spending that money directly, which would require detailed FEC reporting, they would route it through Chakrabarti's private companies. Brand New Congress, LLC. Brand New Campaign, LLC. She drew a diagram in the air with her finger. Donations come into the PAC, money goes out to the LLC. Once it is in the LLC, it disappears. LLCs do not have the same reporting requirements as PACs. The money vanishes into a black hole. The FEC investigated. This, they found that $885,000 had been routed through this scheme, money that should have been traceable, accountable, transparent. Gone. Gabbard leaned forward. Now, the FEC found violations, but they settled with relatively minor penalties. Why? Because Chakrabarti had structured it just cleverly enough that he could claim ignorance of the rules. But you know what? This is, Congresswoman. This is what we call, in the military conduct, unbecoming. It is technically legal, but fundamentally dishonest. She was not done. Let us also discuss Riley Roberts, your boyfriend, before Minette, in 2019. Your campaign paid Roberts $6,000 for consulting services. What services never specified, just $6,000 to your boyfriend. The pattern was becoming clear, and there is more. The Minnesota Campaign Finance Board found that you had used campaign funds for personal legal fees related to your divorce and marriage issues. You used campaign money to pay lawyers to handle your personal marital problems. She stacked the documents like poker chips. Personal travel, campaign money, legal fees for your marriages, campaign money payments to your boyfriend, campaign money payments to your husband, campaign money, a $250,000 fine paid with campaign money. Gabbard sat back, her expression one of almost clinical assessment. Here is what this shows. Congresswoman, you view your campaign account as a personal bank account. You treat donor money as your money. You have systematically used political fundraising as a mechanism to enrich yourself. And the men in your life? She paused, letting it land. I have run for office. I have raised money. I know how campaigns work. And I know that what you have done, legal or not, is a profound betrayal of the 12 Divisen, people who trusted you with their hard-earned dollars. Her voice dropped and became almost intimate. When I deployed to Iraq, soldiers would hand me their personal items before missions, watches, wallets, photos. They trusted me to keep those things safe. Lead. She gestured at the mountain of documents. You have broken that trust. Congresswoman repeatedly, systematically for years, Omar tried to respond, but her voice cracked. These are Republican talking points. You are doing their work for them. Gabbard smiled. That combat smile again. No, Congresswoman, I am reading FEC filings. I am citing Minnesota state findings. I am presenting documents your own campaign submitted. These are not talking points. They are receipts. She closed that section of the folder. But we are not done yet, because the financial corruption is only part of the story. Let us talk about your statements, your loyalties, your rhetoric. The massacre was entering its final phase, Tulsi. Gabbard's voice shifted less prosecutorial, now more sorrowful. This next part is difficult, Congresswoman, because it touches on issues of bias and hatred. But you opened this door when you called me Islamophobic. So let us discuss the documented pattern of anti-Semitic statements. She pulled out the section of documents February 10th, 2019. You tweeted in response to journalist Glenn Greenwald. It is all about the Benjamin's baby, referencing money, when challenged about the anti-Semitic trope. You had invoked that Jews buy political influence. You doubled down, tweeting AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. Gabbard looked up. This is a classic anti-Semitic trope. Congresswoman, the idea that Jews use money and to control politics, it has been used to justify persecution for centuries, and you deployed it casually on Twitter. I was criticizing Israeli policy, Omar protested. Were you? Gabbard's voice hardened. Because criticizing Israeli policy is legitimate, but suggesting that American politicians are bought by Jewish money. That is anti-Semitism. She picked up another document, March 2019. In a speech at a Council on American Islamic Relations event, you referred to the September 11th terrorist attacks. The attacks that killed nearly 3,000 Americans, as some people did something. Gabbard's jaw tightened visibly. Some people did something. That is how you describe the worst terrorist attack in American history. The attack that drove me to enlist, the attack that led me to deploy to Iraq, the attack that defined my generation. Her voice was quiet, now dangerous. 19 al-Qaeda terrorists hijacked 4 planes and murdered 2,977 people. They were not some people. They were terrorists. It was not something, it was mass murder. She leaned forward. But you know what that phrase really does? It minimizes, it obscures, it removes agency and blame. Some people did something like it was an accident, like it was. Random Omar tried to interrupt. That quote was taken out of context. Was it? Gabbard pulled out a full transcript. Here is the full quote. CAIR was founded after 9/11 because they recognized that some people did something and that all of us were starting to lose access to our civil liberties. She set it down. The context does not help you. Congresswoman, you were discussing civil liberties for Muslim Americans, a legitimate concern. But you could not even name the attackers. He could not even call it terrorism. Some people did something. Gabbard's eyes flashed. I have deployed to war zones twice. I have treated wounded soldiers. I have been under fire. And I can tell you exactly who did something on September 11th. Al-Qaeda terrorists who murdered innocent people in the name of radical Islamic ideology. She picked up another document. July 2019, you introduced a resolution to support BDS, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement against Israel. You compared Israel to Nazi Germany. You have consistently voted against. Israel voted against Iron Dome funding, voted against condemning Hamas. I am supporting Palestinian rights, Omar said. Are you Gabbard's voice? Was ICE. Because here is what you are actually supporting. Hamas, a designated terrorist organization. An organization whose charter explicitly calls for the destruction of Israel and the murder of Jews worldwide. She held up a voting record. 2019 voted present on a resolution condemning BDS could not even vote. Yes, 2021 voted against Iron Dome funding defensive technology that saves Israeli civilian lives. 2023 refused to condemn Hamas' October 7th massacre. I condemned violence, Omar. Interrupted. You condemned violence on all sides. Gabbard shot. Back. Hamas terrorists murdered 1,200 people, raped women, beheaded babies, kidnapped children, and you condemned violence on all sides, as if Israeli self-defense is equivalent to terrorism. She sat down. The voting record here is the thing. Congresswoman, I have served. With Jewish soldiers, I have fought alongside them. I have seen their courage, their honor, their commitment to defending democracy. Your rhetoric, it endangers them. It legitimizes hatred against them. Gabbard's voice dropped in. March 2019, the House passed a resolution condemning anti-Semitism. That resolution was written because of you. Your colleagues, Democrats and Republicans, felt compelled to officially condemn anti-Semitic rhetoric because you would not stop. She held up the resolution. 47 members voted yes. 23 voted present, including you. You could not even vote to condemn anti-Semitism when your own party was trying to help you save face. But Gabbard was not finished. Let us talk. About loyalty, let us talk about whose interests you serve. She pulled out a new document, a video transcript. July 2023, you gave a speech to a Somali American community event. You gave a speech. I said, and I quote, "We must continue to be a voice for Somalians, not a voice for Americans, not a voice for your constituents, a voice for Somalians." She looked up. You continued, "We are Somalians first, Muslims second, and Americans third." The room went dead. Silent. Somalians first, Americans third. Gabbard set down the transcript. Congresswoman, I took an oath when I enlisted, when I became an officer, when I entered Congress, when I became Director of National Intelligence. I took the same oath you did. I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Her voice was steel. That oath does not say Somalia first. It says Constitution first, America first, the people you represent. Told us where your loyalty lies. Not with America, with Somalia, not with your constituents in Minnesota, with Muslims globally, not with the Constitution you swore to defend, with foreign interests. Omar's face was flushed. That is a twisted interpretation. Is it? Gabbard pulled out more papers. Let us look at your voting record on foreign policy. You have opposed sanctions on Turkey, a country whose authoritarian leader Erdogan has dismantled democracy. You have opposed support for our Kurdish allies who fought ISIS alongside American troops. You have sided with Venezuela's Maduro regime. You have consistently voted against measures to counter Iranian aggression. She spread the voting records across the prize table. There is a pattern here. Congresswoman, when America's interests conflict with authoritarian regimes, you side with the authoritarians. When America's allies need support, you vote no. When America's enemies need opposition, you vote present. Gabbard leaned back. Her expression, one of utter contempt. You called me a warmonger. You said, I support dictators because I met with Assad to try to understand the Syrian conflict. A meeting I disclosed publicly, took criticism for, and defended as necessary. Intelligence gathering. Her voice rose. But you support actual dictators. You vote to help them. You speak at events hosted by CAIR, an organization the FBI cut ties with. in 2009 because of connections to Hamas and Hanbayan, terrorist financing. She pulled out an FBI document, the Holy Land Foundation trial, the largest terrorism financing prosecution in American history, established CARE's ties to Hamas federal prosecutors named CARE as an unindicted co-conspirator. The FBI ended its partnership with them. Gabbard held up the document. But you speak at their events. You defend them. You work with them. An organization with documented ties to terrorist financing. Her voice was quiet, now deadly. I have fought terrorists. Congresswoman in Iraq. In Kuwait, I have lost friends. Terrorism. I have treated soldiers wounded by terrorist attacks. I have seen what terrorism does. The bodies, the blood, the shattered families. She stood up slowly, her military bearing evident. And you defend organizations that support it. You minimize the worst terrorist attack in American history. You side with Hamas over Israel. You put Somalia above America. She placed both hands on the table, leaning forward. You called me unethical. You questioned my patriotism. But I have bled for this country. I have served it in combat. I have put America first, always beat. Can you say the same? Tulsi Gabbard remained standing. The hearing room was absolutely silent. Even Chairman Meeks had stopped trying to restore order, recognizing that something historic was happening. Let me summarize, Gabbard said, her voice carrying the authority of closing arguments, because it is important that we see the full picture, the pattern, the systematic nature of the tests. Corruption. She began counting on her fingers. 1. Immigration. Fraud allegations. You married Ahmed Elmi under suspicious circumstances. Multiple sources say he is your brother. You filed joint taxes with a different man. While married to Elmi, you have never provided evidence refuting these allegations. No DNA test, no documentation, nothing. Instead, you attack questioners as bigots. Second finger. 2. Tax fraud. Documented by Minnesota authorities, you filed joint returns with someone who was not your legal spouse. You used campaign funds to pay the lawyers who handled the resulting legal problems. Third finger. 3. Campaign finance violations. $250,000 fine, the largest in Minnesota history. Using campaign money for personal expenses, personal travel, personal legal fees, payments to boyfriends and husbands, totaling millions. Fourth finger. 4. Anti-Semitic rhetoric. It is all about the Benjamins. Some people did something comparing Israel to Nazis supporting BDS voting against Iron Dome, refusing to condemn Hamas, a bipartisan House. Resolution condemning your statements. Fifth finger. 5. Foreign loyalty. Somalians, first Americans. Third, your own words. Voting against American interests, supporting authoritarian regimes, working with terror-linked organizations. She spread her hands. This is not a collection of isolated mistakes. Congresswoman, this is a pattern, a systematic pattern of fraud, corruption, and divided loyalty. Gabbard walked around the witness table, coming to stand in the open area between the table and the committee dais. It was a bold move, leaving the safety of her position, making herself vulnerable, but also making herself more powerful. You know what this pattern shows? It shows someone who views public service as a vehicle for personal enrichment, someone who sees campaign donations as personal money, someone who uses identity politics as a shield against accountability, someone whose primary loyalty is not to America or the Constitution, but to foreign interests and personal benefit. She turned to face Omar. Directly, you called me Islamophobic, but I have served with Muslims, fought alongside them, trusted them with my life. Your religion is not the issue, your conduct is. Her voice rose. You called me a warmonger, but I have deployed to actual wars. I have seen what war costs. I have treated the wounded, honored the dead, comforted the grieving. I know the price of military action better than you ever will." She stepped closer. "You called me unethical, but I have never defrauded the IRS, never violated campaign finance laws, never funneled millions to my spouse, never expressed loyalty to a foreign country over America, never minimized terrorism, never supported terrorist-linked organizations." Gabbard's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "But in the silent room, everyone heard you called me a traitor. But I have taken bullets for this country metaphorically, and almost literally, I have sacrificed years of my life in military service. I have deployed to war zones twice. I have put America first in every decision, every vote, every action." She paused. "What have you done?" The question hung in the air like smoke. "You came to America as a refugee. This country gave you sanctuary, opportunity, education, freedom, the ability to rise. From a refugee camp in Kenya to the United States Congress, America gave you everything." Her voice hardened. "And you have repaid that generosity with fraud, corruption, and divided loyalty. You have stolen from the people who trusted you. You have expressed loyalty to Somalia over the country that saved. You have defended terrorism and minimized the worst attack on American soil in history." Gabbard shook her head slowly. "I have met refugees who love America more than many native-born citizens, who appreciate what this country offers, who embrace American values and American identity while maintaining pride in their heritage. You could have been that person. You should have been that person." She gestured at the stack of documents instead. "You have been this person. Someone who uses identity as a shield, who cries bigotry when questioned about documented facts, who plays the victim while victimizing your donors, your constituents, and your country." Gabbard turned to address the committee. "Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I came here today to testify about ethics in foreign policy. Congresswoman Omar questioned my credibility to do so. She has given me the opportunity to question hers." She walked back to the witness table, gathered her papers, based on the evidence I have presented, all publicly available, all documented, all verifiable. I believe Congress should take the following actions. She read from a prepared list. 1. Refer the immigration fraud allegations to the Department of Justice for criminal investigation. The allegations are specific, credible, and unrefuted. They deserve a proper federal investigation, with subpoena power. 2. Refer the tax violations to the Internal Revenue Service for investigation and potential prosecution. Filing joint returns with someone who is not your spouse is federal tax fraud. 3. Refer the campaign finance violations to the Federal Election Commission and the Department of Justice. The pattern of using campaign funds for personal enrichment appears to violate federal campaign finance law. 4. The House Ethics Committee should conduct a full investigation into all of these matters. The $250,000 fine from Minnesota is just the beginning. The full scope of financial impropriety needs to be examined. Findings of these investigations, the House should consider expulsion proceedings. The Constitution gives you that power, if the allegations are proven, and much of this is already documented. Congresswoman Omar should be expelled from Congress. She sat down. The list? I understand these are serious recommendations, but we are talking about serious violations: fraud, corruption, anti-Semitism, divided loyalty. These are not mere disagreements about policy. These are fundamental breaches of ethics and law. Gabbard looked directly at Omar one final time. You wanted to question my credibility. Congresswoman, you have given me the opportunity to expose yours. I have served this country honorably for over 2 decades. I have deployed to war zones. I have earned the combat medical badge under enemy fire. I have maintained integrity under the most difficult circumstances imaginable. Her voice was cold. You have committed fraud, violated campaign finance laws, expressed loyalty to foreign countries, and attacked the people who question you. There is no comparison between us. None. She gathered her materials. I am not afraid of you. Congresswoman Omar, I have faced actual enemies with actual weapons who actually wanted to kill me. I have sat through mortar attacks. I have treated soldiers bleeding out from IED wounds. I have held dying men in my arms beat. You do not frighten me, and your accusations do not work on me. I am a woman of color. I am a religious minority. I am a veteran. Your identity politics shield does not work when you are fighting someone who shares those identities but actually has honor. She picked up the manila folder. I have presented evidence, documents, facts, records. You have presented attacks, accusations, and deflections. The American people can decide who has credibility. Tulsi Gabbard turned to leave, then stopped, turned back one more time. Actually, no, I have changed my mind. I do not think the American people need to decide. I think the evidence speaks for itself. She smiled. That combat? Smile. One final time. You are finished, Congresswoman, and she walked out. The explosion was instantaneous before Tulsi Gabbard had even left the building, before Ilhan Omar could mount any coherent response. Before Chairman Meeks could adjourn the hearing, the video was everywhere. C-SPAN posted the full exchange. Within 30 minutes, it was 97 minutes of testimony, but the brutal highlights were clipped immediately. Tulsi destroys Omar. On immigration fraud, combat veteran exposes Ilhan Omar's corruption. Omar cannot answer Gabbard's questions about brother marriage. Within 6 hours, 50 million views across all platforms. Within 24 hours, 150 million views. Within 72 hours, 350 million views. It was bigger than any political moment in recent memory. Bigger than viral debates. Bigger than gotcha moments. Bigger than campaign ads. Because this was not spin. This was not out of context clips. This was a combat veteran under oath, methodically presenting documentation of fraud, corruption, and divided loyalty, and the target could not respond. Omar tried. God knows. She tried. Her first statement posted to Twitter 3 hours after the hearing. Today, I was attacked by a Republican operative who has made a career of Islamophobia and warmongering. The allegations against me have been repeatedly debunked. This is political theater, designed to distract from the real issues facing American families. The response was swift and brutal. She presented FEC filings. What is debunked about FEC filings? The Minnesota Campaign Finance Board fined you $250,000. Is the state of Minnesota Islamophobic? She is director of National SENS. Intelligence appointed by Trump, but she is a Democrat turned Republican who served under Obama. How is she a Republican operative? She literally provided receipts. Respond to the receipts. But Omar could not respond to the receipts because the receipts were real. The squad tried to defend her. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweeted, "Today we saw a coordinated attack on a woman of color, a Muslim, an immigrant, and a refugee. This is what white supremacy looks like. Ayanna Pressley, the Islamophobia on display. Today was disgusting. We must protect our sister Ilhan from these racist attacks." Rashida Tlaib. They are afraid of a black Muslim woman who speaks truth to power. That is why they attack her. That is why they lie about her. But even the squad's defensive shield was cracking because Tulsi Gabbard was a woman of color, a religious minority, an immigrant's daughter, someone who had faced actual discrimination and actual violence and actual hardship. She had deployed to war zones. She had earned combat decorations, the identity politics. Defense did not work. Journalists who had previously protected Omar found themselves forced to actually investigate the allegations. The Washington Post ran a piece examining the evidence behind Gabbard's claims about Omar. They could not fully debunk the claims because the evidence was documented. The New York Times, Omar's campaign finance issues, a timeline. Again, they laid out the facts and found that yes, the $250,000 fine was real. Yes, the payments to her husband's firm were extraordinary. Yes, there were questions about the marriage timeline. Even CNN, which had largely avoided the controversy, ran a segment titled The Omar Allegations. What we know, and what they knew, was that Gabbard had presented a lot of documented evidence that had never been properly addressed. The dam was breaking within a week. Representative James Comer, chairman of the House Oversight Committee, announced a formal investigation into Omar's campaign finances and potential immigration fraud. The Department of Justice confirmed it was reviewing the immigration allegations. The IRS, responding to congressional pressure, announced it was examining the tax filing issues for the Minnesota state legislature, began discussing whether to reopen its investigation with an eye toward more serious penalties. Most devastatingly, a poll showed that 58% of Americans, including 41% of Democrats, believed the allegations against Omar were credible and deserved investigation. Her support in her own district dropped from 74% to 61%. Primary challengers began announcing their campaigns. National Democratic leaders began distancing themselves. Chuck Schumer refused to comment. Nancy Pelosi's office said, "These are serious allegations that should be investigated." President Biden's press secretary said, "The president believes all members of Congress should be held to the highest ethical standards." Seemingly invincible was crumbling, and at the center of it all was a simple fact. A combat veteran had presented evidence, and nobody could refute it. 90 days after the hearing, Tulsi Gabbard sat in her office at the Director of National Intelligence Complex in McLean, Virginia. The news played on. The screen in the corner DOJ expands investigation into Omar's immigration history. Her phone buzzed a text from an old Army buddy who had served with her in Iraq. "Saw what you did about damn time." Someone stood up to her. "You always were the toughest one in the unit. Semper Fi. LT. She smiled. Not the combat smile. A real smile. Another text. This one from a former colleague in Congress, a Democrat. "I cannot say this publicly, but thank you, we have known about this stuff for years. Nobody had the guts to call it out. You did?" She set the phone down and looked at the intelligence briefing on her desk. Real threats, real enemies. Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, terrorist networks, cybersecurity vulnerabilities. It was the work that mattered. This was what service meant. The political theater, the hearing, the viral videos, the media circus, that was just noise. What mattered was that she had told the truth. She had presented evidence. She had held a corrupt politician accountable. And she had done it not because Omar was Muslim or black or an immigrant. She had done it because Omar was a fraud who had used identity as a shield while committing documented violations of law and ethics. The military had taught Gabbard many things: how to lead under fire, how to make decisions in chaos, how to maintain integrity when everything around you is collapsing. But the most important lesson was this: evidence matters. Truth matters. Honor matters. You cannot defeat those things with accusations. You cannot deflect them with identity politics. You cannot make them disappear by calling your critics bigots. Truth is a weapon more powerful than any other, and when wielded by someone with actual credibility, someone who had earned that credibility through service and sacrifice, And honor, it is unstoppable. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a news alert. Breaking House Ethics Committee votes to expand investigation into Omar campaign finances, tax violations, and immigration issues. Gabbard closed the alert and went back to provided by. Her intelligence briefing the real work continued 6 months after the hearing. Ilhan Omar stood on the stage at a community center in Minneapolis, addressing what was supposed to be a supportive crowd. The primary was 3 months away. She had raised less money than her main challenger. Her polling was underwater for the first time since her election. The investigations were ongoing. DOJ, IRS, House Ethics, the squad had fractured. AOC was facing her own primary challenges. Tlaib was entangled in ethics issues, and Presley had distanced herself from the more radical members. We have been under attack. Omar told the crowd, her voice carrying less confidence than before. They use Islamophobia, racism, and misogyny to try to silence strong women of color who speak truth to power. But the applause was scattered, uncertain because everyone had watched the hearing. Everyone had seen the documents. Everyone had heard Tulsi Gabbard methodically, devastatingly, completely destroy the identity politics defense by being everything Omar claimed to be and actually having integrity. A reporter asked the question everyone wanted answered. Congresswoman, will you take a DNA test to disprove the allegations about your marriage to Ahmed Elmi? Omar's response was the same as always. These allegations have been debunked. I will not dignify them with further response, but will not dignify was no longer working, because Gabbard had shown the American people that what will not dignify is what guilty people say. Innocent people provide evidence. Innocent people welcome investigation. Innocent people do not hide behind accusations of bigotry. The primary poll numbers continued to drop, 61% to 54% to 49%. For the first time in her political career, Ilhan Omar was genuinely vulnerable, and 800 miles away, in a different city, in a different life. Tulsi Gabbard was doing reserve drill training with her unit, back in uniform, back to basics, back to what mattered. A young soldier approached her after training. Nervous, ma'am. I wanted to thank you for what you did, for exposing the corruption, for standing up. Gabbard smiled. Not the combat smile, the real one. I did not do anything. The special soldier, I just told the truth, presented evidence. That is what we do in the military. We deal in facts, not feelings. The soldier hesitated, but you destroyed her. Ma'am, everyone is talking about it. Gabbard shook her head. I did not. To destroy her? She destroyed herself. I just made sure everyone saw it. She gathered her gear, preparing to leave. Here is what I learned in Iraq, what I learned in Kuwait, what I learned in every difficult situation I have faced. Truth is the most powerful weapon in the project world, but you have to have the courage to use it, and you have to have the credibility to back it up. She slung her pack over her shoulder. Ilhan Omar had neither. I had both. That is why what happened, happened. The young soldier nodded, understanding as Gabbard walked to her vehicle. She thought about that day in the hearing room, the manila folder, the documents, the evidence, Omar's face, as each allegation landed like a precision strike. She thought about the veterans who had messaged her, the Muslim, the soldiers she had served with, who thanked her for showing that criticism of corruption is not Islamophobia, the immigrants who appreciated someone distinguishing between legitimate refugees and those who abuse the system. Most of all, she thought about the principle at the heart of everything: serve with honor, lead with integrity, tell the truth. Everything else is just noise.